Good afternoon, everyone. This is Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. Today, we are proud to feature the Virtual Alumni Weekend webinar, The Future of Virtual Events. Your instructor today is Dr. Glenn Platt. Dr. Platt, the C. Michael Armstrong Professor of Emerging Technology and Marketing, is also the founder and co-director of Miami University Esports. He has won the School of Business Teaching Effectiveness Award, the Associated Student Government Effective Educator Award, and the university's Knox Award for Teaching. Dr. Platt is also president-elect of the International Digital Media and Arts Association. We are grateful to Dr. Platt for taking the time to join us today. Questions were collected during registration, and Dr. Platt will address some of those throughout the webinar today. Please note that we may not have time to get to every question. You will, though, have the opportunity to ask questions during the webinar by clicking the Ask a Question button. Today's webinar will last about an hour, including time for questions and answers. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Platt.
Thank you, Molly, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my virtual Miami University office here in my basement. I wish we could be doing this in person. I always like there's something about being all together with the alumni when we do this every year. That's really, I think, really touching. But I'll have to say, for this particular theme, for this topic, this is the perfect way for us to be together. Because I'm going to try to sort of walk the walk that I'm going to be talking the talk to you about here today. So I'm going to show you a little bit under the hood about how I do some of the things that I do in my virtual events that I run, and hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights about what you're going to do or could do, I guess, if you are interested in doing your own virtual event. So that said, I'm going to share my desktop with you here, and we'll just kind of jump into the presentation. So welcome. The future of virtual events. I'm going to point out the bit.ly link at the bottom here. The link will be available to you again on the last slide of this presentation. All of these slides you're seeing here, you can see them again by just going to, it's just bit.ly, bit.ly/alumni weekend virtual, all lowercase. And you can follow along or look at this later. And you may want to, because I'm going to talk about some different platforms really that help you run virtual events. So you don't need to write anything down. You can just sit and listen and we can chit chat about it. So as Molly said, I've been at Miami a while. I think this is my 28th year. Holy cow. I'm the founder of a department that used to be called Interactive Media Studies, but the department now is called the Department of Emerging Technology in Business and Design. It's a mouthful, but it actually describes what we do. We're an interdisciplinary program that merges tech and coding and digital stuff, virtual reality, video games, that kind of thing, with business and digital marketing and tech entrepreneurship and product management and all kinds of social media marketing, and then design thinking, design processes, making things, usability, all that kind of thing. And our students go on to do all kinds of super cool digital stuff. We got about 800 students majoring in it right now, about 200 minoring in it. We've got branch programs in San Francisco, Cincinnati, and Luxembourg. So semester-long internships that we do with tech startups in those cities. So we've got groups of students that go, for example, to the Bay Area for a whole semester. They all live together. They get to engage with our Miami alums in these areas, which we are very grateful to all of you for. And we also have a game design and game development program. Our game program was ranked by Intelligent.com as the #1 game program in the country. Princeton Review routinely ranks us in one of the top game programs in the country. We do some pretty awesome game design and game development, and actually have a separate bachelor's in game design and game development. And then, as Molly said, one of our new exciting things that we've been doing is that we are the home of Miami University varsity esports. So Miami was the first Division I school to have a varsity esports team. We are consistently ranked in the top 15 or so on ESPN's rankings of varsity teams. We compete. We once held the national championship. and compete at a national level and have a pretty awesome arena on campus too, which hopefully once we're all back there, I can get a chance to show you what we're doing with that. We're super excited about the future of esports, and we think for Miami University, it is the future of sports. So anyway, happy to talk about any of that when we get to the Q&A, but those things are just to give you some context about what I do. I'm the department chair, but I also do teach digital marketing. That's kind of my area, gamification, digital marketing, social media marketing, that kind of thing. So I don't mean to be kind of Pollyanna about the whole thing, but I really like to look at this COVID experience as an amazing opportunity, right? I realize that we're all trying to figure out, how to live at home all the time and how to socially distance and wear our masks and that kind of thing. But I see it as a way to think about doing things that we did not normally do before, right? And I think that's the power of virtual events and the power of doing things virtually, right? When you see these challenges in front of you, gosh, what am I going to do? I can't teach my class in Laws Hall anymore. How am I going to teach my class? Instead of thinking about it as taking something that you did in the physical world and just replicating it in a virtual world, the real opportunity with virtual spaces is to think about doing things that you could never do in the real world, right? That's the power of it. And I want to stress that as you think about what a virtual event could be, start thinking about what you could never do with a real event, what kind of power that these virtual spaces have. And this is a perfect example of this, right? So when Miami University announced we were not going to have a graduation, I sat down with one of our alums. That's actually him in the video there in the center of the screen, Austin Mace. And Austin is the chief operating officer, or maybe he's the CEO of Subversive VR consultancy down in Texas. And he and his team and I worked on developing what would be a virtual graduation for our students. Now, the key here is to think, what could you do in graduation that you could never otherwise do if you were physically there? Or even think about, like, what is the most annoying parts of graduation, right? So one annoying part is you can't sit and talk with your friends, right? And in this virtual space, these little avatars that you see populated on the or around the seal, I think they tried hard not to walk on the seal. What we had was a bunch of rooms, about 100 different little rooms like this, so that 20 students at a time were graduating together simultaneously, and they could chat with each other with voice chat in this virtual space. Every student got their name and a picture and their degree up on the wall, which you would never be able to do at a graduation. You had video being fed from our governor live to each of these spaces, right? Again, the power of this was that it was something that never had been done before. That's the theme I want to talk about here today, how to use virtual events to expand what engagement could be. So if we're going to talk about the history of virtual events, we've got to go back to the first webcam. This is the first webcam. The first webcam was back in 1993. And it was a dude at Stanford University who was tired of getting up and going around the corner to the kitchen to see if there was coffee in the coffee machine. And so he set up this webcam back then that took 3 pictures a minute, I think. And all it did was look at the coffee pot. This was the very first webcam. This is an image of the very first webcam images. It ran for 25 years, interestingly enough. Actually, more interesting, the coffee pot itself was auctioned on eBay for about 3,000 UK pounds. So go figure, right? So we've gone from that to having virtual cameras like this, which are on the International Space Station, right? So what we're looking at here would be live video from the space station, right? This is in space, right? Now, live, broadcasting, right? That's a huge leap. And now we can go to these web pages on the internet that have lists of all the webcams that are out there, and you can look at what's going on for the traffic in San Francisco. You can be in the jungle. You can be in a marine aquarium. right? All of these things are now available to us that weren't there before. And not only can we watch them, but we also can participate with them. So this, if you see it in the little corner here, is an Oculus Quest. I'm going to talk about this a couple of times, but these sort of head-mounted virtual reality goggles that you can buy for a couple $100s these days, you can put that on, and this guy that we're looking at here who's telling us about London is walking with us, right? So we have a virtual tour, and I'm gonna just turn around here to sort of show you what that looks like, except instead of turning with a mouse, I would actually be turning with my head. I would just look around, and there I would be, looking at the London Eye. Now, the largest virtual event in terms of audience that has happened was Beyonce, because she's the queen. If you have not, I just want to say, seeing this concert they made a movie out of it. It's on Netflix. You need to watch it. Like, it's amazing. It's truly amazing. 41 million people tuned into Coachella for her to do this. It was a one-off show that she spent a whole year preparing, and it was just incredible, right? So massive audiences engaging both passively and actively in these spaces are what it's all about. Now, in the COVID era, we're seeing this all the time, right? That's why we're having this conversation now, right? We're having it because all of us are going to virtual events. We're all logging in. And in some sense, we're kind of burnt out on it. And I know one of the questions was about how to rise above the din, and I'm going to talk a little about that. The big event probably this year in terms of the largest number of people participating will likely be Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference. There's 28 million Apple developers. They've opened it up for free, so anybody can participate. This is usually a fairly expensive event. You got to go to San Francisco for it. So we're expecting this to be probably the big virtual event of the year. So I want to take a little quick pause here and ask you what kind of virtual events you've been part of. So this is an audience participation point here. So I'd like you to take your phone out or open another tab, or if you're on your desktop, however you want to do it. I'd like you to go to www.menti.com, and you're going to use that code that you see there, 369103. All right. So I'm gonna give you 30 seconds here to go and answer the questions, or the question that's waiting for you. You can vote for more than one. Oh my God, only 3 of you are voting. Yay, someone else voted. All right, hold on, let me stop our Jeopardy music here. Right, so one thing I'm trying to kind of model here a bit is ways that you can take these virtual events and try to make them a little more engaging. So Menti's an application. Mentimeter is actually what it is, that allows for not just this type of voting, but it has scales, and it's got like 10 or so different types of interactive audience participation activities, I guess, right? So if you haven't voted, by the way, if you're looking at my screen here, up at the top of the page, you can see www.menti.com, the code 369103. But it's a super cool application, and I like that little animated way these bars are bouncing up and down, and you can upload pictures for each of these voting. So that the one over live streaming is Coldplay. That was a live streaming Coldplay thing with Chris Martin that I saw, and he was adorable. For live speakers, this is, of course, Seth Meyers in his attic where he broadcasts from, virtual reality things and webinars. You kind of get the idea there, right? So let's go back to the presentation here. I'm going to categorize types of virtual events in these sort of 8 buckets. There are all kinds of different ways that you could do that, but these are the ones that kind of make sense for me. So I'm going to quickly go through these, and then I'm going to go deeper into them as we follow on after this. So first, virtual conferences. Like this is the Worldwide Developers Conference I was talking about before. Pretty much every major company, if they have not canceled their big annual conference, they've moved it to be an online conference. And I actually participated in one yesterday that I'm going to show you a screenshot from here in a little bit. Then there are webinars or training. This is typically where somebody is sharing their desktop and they're showing you how to use their application or how to do a thing. Think of it a lot like what we're doing this past semester here at Miami, sort of teaching online. That's kind of basically what a webinar is. Then there are webcasts. These are more produced streaming, one-to-many, almost like lectures is a way to think of it. So they're not so much a hands-on piece like webinars, they're just more broadcast. Then there's podcasts. We all know what podcasts are. They are audio, essentially audio versions of webcasts. You can have live and virtual events. So events where some people are in the actual place it's happening and others are participating virtually. So for those of you who have a Peloton, my most favorite thing I have bought this year, I want to say, I ride bikes virtually with people who are live in the studio with the coach who's leading us, right? That's a sort of hybrid of those things. Then there's live streaming. This has been this radical change in the way the music industry has reacted to COVID. And I'm going to talk actually quite a bit about it because I'm a huge music fan. And I've been actively participating in live streaming events quite a bit over the last 3 months. And then there's live chats where you, like the Zoom meetings in a sense that you've been in, right? Someone is sort of the moderator, but other people are asking questions. Lastly, at the most sort of lowest tech version, and it's where I'm going to start here in a minute, are AMAs or live tweets. AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. Reddit has a space for that, but there are other platforms that do these AMAs. AMAs are just text-based questions and answers, right? So one of the most popular AMAs on Reddit was when President Obama went on there. People could ask him anything, and he answered the questions as they came in, or probably someone else was typing them, but he was answering the questions. So like I said, I want to start with that, and I'm going to organize my conversation around these 8 different types of virtual events by grouping them first on what I'm calling personal, so intimate, small, and then I'm going to talk about huge, big, giant virtual events. So when we begin by talking about, the simple, right? I want to be clear that for us as individuals, virtual doesn't have to be complicated. For what we're looking at here, the little animation behind my slide here is Instagram Live. If you have Instagram, if you have Facebook, if you have Twitter, if you have LinkedIn, and then we could probably go on from there, but any of those applications on your phone allows you to broadcast live. Now that's a powerful shift in the media landscape. Think about this, that when I was young, right, there were 3 networks, there were 3 broadcasters, but now your voice is the same as any of those broadcasters, right? You have the same ability to stream a live event, a live chat, a here I am from your phone that any broadcaster has, that I have sitting here talking to you. And what that means is you can create these very spontaneous and intimate connections with your audience or your customers. So if you're a brand and you're, let's say, visiting your new factory, and you can just kind of boot up the phone, hit a button, and suddenly you could be broadcasting to the followers and fans of your company and say, hey, I thought you'd like to see, how Pringles potato chips are made, which are super interesting. So this is all in our hands. The example I'm going to show you here is I'm going to have to stop sharing this screen for a second. I'm going to share a different screen with you. Is on my phone, and it's called Periscope. So Periscope is an application that Twitter owns. And so we're now looking at my phone. And it is a live broadcast platform, much like Facebook Live and all these others. What I particularly like about Periscope is you can view things on a map. So if we look here, the red dots are showing me the number of people who are broadcasting. And I can zoom in here, which is what I'm going to do. And so I can see in the UK, I guess we're in London actually here. This guy is in his car. Let's see if I can turn him up a little here, but you don't need to hear him. You get the idea. And he's just talking, right? And what I want you what I think is sort of most awesome about this is he's doing this right now, like this second in London. This is happening. And he's not a famous guy. He's not somebody who's got his own show. He's just somebody who is interested in talking to the world. Or we could go to France, or we could make our way east here, and we can go to Croatia. Right, this is live broadcasting, and it's an application that any of us have. Any of us can be a broadcaster. Any of us, one second here. I'm gonna bring back my presentation. Any of us can share what we're doing at any point in time. All right, we're back. So one of my favorite virtual events during this COVID era is something called Tim's Twitter Party. So if you find this interesting, you feel free to go to Tim's Twitter party at Tim's Twitter Listening Party. Sorry, Tim's Twitter Listening Party.com. But here's kind of how it works. Tim here is actually, he's a famous musician in a band called the Charlatans in the UK, and he knows everyone in the UK who's a famous musician, super connected. And so what he does is he has these listening parties on Twitter. So for example, this was yesterday at 10 p.m. their time, Orchestral Maneuvers of the Dark, great band, played their album Dazzle Ships. And what happens is at 10 p.m., everybody puts that on. They hit play on Spotify or wherever they're listening to it. They all start at the same time. And then we as a group are listening to this album together. And as the songs are playing, the band itself is participating in a conversation with all of us who are listening to it and talking to us about the songs. So as this song was on yesterday, like the band is saying, hey, this ridiculously loud open bass drum made this song, it compressed, blah, blah, blah. Someone else who's listening asks, is the American Voice Paul's wife? And the band's like, yes, and it is. It's Maureen Humphreys. I find it to be the most sort of community affirming thing that I have done in this COVID era, because I am listening with hundreds of other fans all over the world to albums that I love, right? And there was like a New Order conversation, and there was Cocteau Twins one, and there was Lloyd Cole, and all these bands I love. And we're all talking about the songs we love with the artists themselves who are participating. This could never happen in the real world, right? We can listen to these songs at home, but without this kind of virtual engagement, like I actually get to talk to and be intimate and authentic with a band that I love. That's what Tim's Twitter Listening Party does, and why I think it is the most powerful example of a virtual event that I've seen, because it's simple. There's not a whole lot to it. You just get on Twitter, you just tweet, and it's this whole tweet storm that happens with the hashtag Tim's Twitter Listening Party at these specific times where we're all listening to the band. Yesterday, I was part of a virtual conference called Nudge Stock. Nudge Stock is put on by Ogilvy UK. Ogilvy is one of the largest marketing and digital companies in the world. And what Nudge Stock, for this conference that they do every year, it's about behavioral science and creativity. It's super interesting, right? Like, so Dan Ariely was speaking, and all kinds of interesting folks about behavioral science and what people do. What I loved about it, and what I love about virtual events in this space, and I actually think it's valuable, is the authenticity of where people are while they present, right? So here's Jenny Roper. She's a bigwig. She's the head of Insight at Kinetic. She's saying super smart, interesting things. And I get to see the paintings on her wall, right? I see her house. If you're participating in these virtual events, you get this glimpse into people's lives, And I know folks are a little awkward about it or think maybe it's not professional, but I would actually spin it the opposite way. I think it's incredibly professional and incredibly effective. And why it's effective is because it lends an air of authenticity to who you are, right? It shows that you are a person like anybody else. There was that famous video chat on that was via Skype. It was at CNN or one of the news stations a couple years ago, where the guy's kids came in while they were interviewing him, right? And they interrupted him. He was a Miami alum, by the way. That just was the most charming thing in the world, right? And you can't help but just love that guy, and he's an awesome, family guy, and it gives you this insight into people's lives. When I watch these musicians playing in their bedrooms, in their living rooms, right? They're not like this godly person on a stage that is makeup and lights and all these fancy things that are adorning what they do. They're a real person. And I think authenticity is one of the gems of virtual events, because you can give this very sort of unscripted thing, as opposed to these TED Talks, which, are highly scripted, are super fancy, and don't quite give the same sense of realness, I guess I'll say, that some of these other types of presentations do. So let's talk about some pro tips for being in these personal virtual events. I can't stress this enough. Everyone thinks that video is the thing that matters the most, but it's not. It's audio. Audio matters the most. If you're going to spend the money on a good microphone. I'm talking to you. I'm gonna actually, and this is a good example of giving you a little bit of a peek behind the curtain here. I am going to turn off my background green screen so you can see where I am here for a moment. So I'm going to stop sharing that, and I'm going to start sharing this. So what you're seeing here, I think, is the tool that I use to give this virtual background. I'm going to turn off my background here. This is where I am. I'm in my basement, and I'm talking on this microphone. And the microphone is a little away, but you can hear as my voice gets close to it, like it's a radio quality voice. It's not that distanced echo thing where someone is using the microphone that's on their computer. It's worth investing the money. You can get a decent podcasting microphone for $50, $100 tops. And you'll be glad you do it. That's the part that matters more than the video does. So let me get back to my presentation here. But let's talk a little bit about video. So I can't tell you how many virtual events I've participated in and meetings I've participated in where I'm basically looking up the nose of somebody. Folks who use their webcams that are in their laptops are sort of pivoted out, and this is the view that you see. If you have to use your webcam to participate in a virtual event, my advice would be to put something under your laptop, like a pile of books, whatever it is you got. Raise your laptop so the camera is at eye level. Having the camera at eye level gives the perspective like you're seeing here of me, where you get the full head. Nobody looks good from below, at least with my chin situation. It's not so great. So if you have to use your webcam, do that. But ideally, get an external camera. They're also fairly cheap. You can get an external camera for 20 to 30, $40. That's actually a 4K quality, incredibly great camera, way better than the one that's built into your computer, right? So that's what I have. I've got an external camera right there that's sitting on top of my monitor, and it does a higher quality video. Light yourself from the front and not the back. Don't sit in front of a window. If you can, even have a light itself. So I've got a light on this. I'll turn it on here. I don't think it's gonna kind of wash me out a little, so I'm not gonna use it, but you can use that to give kind of a more flattering look. When you talk to people, and this is the hard part, because I'm not even doing it here, look at the camera. Don't look at yourself. Don't look at the other people in the webinar. I know when we talk to people, we want to look at them. If you can, move the image of that person as close as you can to where your camera is. So if you are going to look at them, you're not looking too far away from the camera. This looking down piece is what I'm trying to get you to avoid. Zoom, all of these services have the ability to use virtual backgrounds. Give that some thought. Like this one here, I use, but I have fun ones also where I'm underwater. I've got one with cats are sitting on my head. Like there's all of these applications out there, like Snap Camera can help you do that. Take a look at that. If you are really into the fancy stuff, OBS camera is what I'm using. It's a little harder to use, but it lets you do green screen stuff. So take a look at doing something like that, right? If you're not going to do that, stage your virtual space. Be aware of what's behind you. Put a couple of books if you're trying to look all booky about something, but give some thought to the space behind you and what you're saying about yourself with the space behind you. When you're presenting with video, as I say here in number 8, motion really matters. So I know I did it a bit here. I think I probably should have done it more, but having animated images while you talk goes a long way to keep your audience's attention, right? This static image here is not terribly exciting. You're seeing, this woman's face and a little tiny picture of me, but having an animation like when I was showing you the Instagram live slide and it was animating behind it, keeps your audience engaged. And then lastly, break things up. So don't go with long slides like the one I'm doing right now. And instead, I think if I had a little more time, I would have broken these 9 things up into 4 or 5 different slides. So think about what the goal is for your virtual event. If you're doing these personal ones, are you trying to convey information, or is it a Q&A? Why are you doing this? This image is Teotur, who's a musician from the Faroe Islands, which are these tiny islands in sort of the North Sea, like above Scotland. And I'm a big fan of his. And he was doing these live streaming events in his studio. So it was this wonderful, intimate, like I could see how the sausage was made. And again, that's a great way to engage with your customers. It's a great way to engage with your audience, that having them see how that's made, that authenticity is going to make them feel connected with you like nobody has ever been before. Then you got the big virtual events. Big virtual events are these lots of people events. Bottom line on these is you need a platform, right? You need a tool that's going to help you do this. You don't want to run a virtual event, a large virtual event yourself. There are third-party providers who do it. Even this webinar that we're on right now, right? There are folks that Miami is contracted with who help them with webinars. There's a webinar company. Take advantage of these folks. So this bulleted list I have here are they're not all the big players, but these are most of the big names in this space. And if you Google any of these names, if you check them out, they all offer fairly similar products. They each have their own kind of differentiation, but they offer turnkey solutions. And when I say turnkey solutions, what I mean is they'll do the ticketing to the event. So people can buy tickets or get free tickets, however you're going to do it. They'll integrate live chat. They'll integrate with your customer relationship management systems. So what I mean by that is if you've got mailing lists, if you've got like all this contact information for who your customers are, it'll all just kind of plug in like Salesforce or something like that. They provide all of the streaming tech and manage the streaming, which can get technically pretty complicated if you've got a large event. They typically have breakout rooms to allow like one big event, and then you move into a smaller breakout room, which is a fabulous best practice. It allows people to engage with each other on a topic instead of just sitting and listening to someone like you're doing to me here. They have exhibitor spaces, much like if you were doing a real event, you would have an exhibitor hall where you've got, companies hawking their wares. They can do that virtually. They can build landing pages for the event, and they manage all your speakers and sponsorship. So I'd strongly encourage you, if you're thinking about doing a large-scale virtual event, to think about one of these companies here and kind of dive in and maybe get a couple of them to bid on what it is that you want to do. Then if you want to get like truly virtual with a virtual event, I'm a big fan of virtual reality, right? We teach that in our department. And so I think it has come to a point now where virtual events are a very real thing that you can do. So what this is here is a company called Spatial.io here. And I am going to be using them actually in my class in fall. And the way Spatialio works is you sign in with your picture like that guy, and then it makes a 3D avatar just straight from your picture from your webcam. It makes a 3D avatar of you, and then you can be in a virtual space with a physical person. Like this guy who's here is sitting in a room at his office, and the woman you see on the right here is somewhere else. But what she does is she puts on this, and what she sees is this whole office. And so you can have a whole group of people virtually actually seeing their avatars. Their voices, when you're wearing your headset, come from the direction of where that person is standing in the room. It's amazingly realistic. You hear voices where they're coming from. The avatars look like people. And then in the virtual space, as you can see here, you can have Post-it notes and images and video and 3D models that are floating in front of you that you all can engage with. And so you can build this, like what you're looking at here is not fake. Like this, like it says here, shot real time and spatial. Like this was what you're seeing is how this looks. I'm very excited about technology like spatial. I think it is the future of virtual events. We're not there at a mass stage yet because this device is $300, $400, $500 depending on which one you get, and the ones that are actually wearing on this are more like $1,000. So, can you do this at scale now? No. But for the right audience, for people who have the right tools, it can be pretty powerful. I should also say that one other cool thing about Spatial is that you can participate just from your web browser. Now, you're not standing there in virtual reality, so you're not a body in the room, but from your web browser, you are in the room and you can move around on your web browser and participate. So you don't have to have an Oculus to do that kind of thing. So what are some quick tips and best practices before we wrap this up? First, always think about timing. When you're doing a virtual event, remember it's global, right? Even the folks that are on this call, I know for a fact because my friend Marie said something to me a moment ago, right? She's 3 hours away from here. Some folks are going to be in completely different time zones. So think about whether you want to stagger your event to be a multi-part event, and each part is in a different time zone. Like Nudge Stock that I did yesterday had 3 chunks to it. There was a chunk they did really early. It was like 3 in the morning. I woke up early for it. But that was for Asia. And then the second chunk was for Europe and the UK. And the third chunk was for the US. Now, everyone can watch all of them. It was all different content, but they were thinking about when people were going to be awake. So give some thought to the timing with your audience. You have to invest in marketing for virtual events. Virtual events don't just suddenly get on people's radar. So when you get your event set up, start to develop a social media marketing plan. How are you going to get this out to your audience? Now, depending on who your audience is, this is a tough one for me to address, in this type of a setting, but you all know who your audience is. You should know where they spend their time. Figure out how you can share things in that space. One of the best ways to advance virtual events is with influencer marketing. So who are your influencers? How can you get them to share and talk about the event? Leverage your speakers as influencers. So ask them to help you promote through their audience and their network and the things that they do. With virtual events, and this is true, for anything that involves technology, is always have a backup, because you just never know what's going to work, right? And so, for example, in this presentation, I sent this presentation ahead of time to Molly, because if something happened here at my house, she could theoretically run the presentation for me, and then I could call in on the WebEx line or something like that, right? So have a plan B in mind. Now, this sounds funny, but like before you do any of this, pause and just say, do I really need to do this live? So, for example, these musicians that do these live streaming from their bedrooms and their kitchens, does it have to be live? Maybe, maybe not, right? Maybe they could just record it and put it up. So live is this whole other level of complexity. And if you don't need to be live, don't do it live. Record it. We can record from our webcams. We can record on our screens. We can then edit it. We can clean it up. We can make it a little more concise. Give some thought to that. Know about who your audience is. As audiences skew younger, they're more likely to participate in your live event with their mobile devices. So is your live event, your virtual event, mobile friendly? You need to think about that. Where are they coming from? Do they have the connectivity, right? There are all parts of the world where they don't have broadband. There are all parts of the United States where they don't have broadband. So have some thought as to how complex the video and content you have is, and can they connect in and participate? And I think there's some irony in this, given that I've been talking for 42 minutes, but try to be brief. Nobody likes sitting through a super long virtual speech. Like even this, I'm sure you think, I appreciate, that you set aside time for me to do this, but this is a long time to sit and listen to me. It's a long time to sit and listen to anybody. Break things up, chunk it up, make it tiny. We know the attention span today of America, attention span of kids, the attention span of grownups shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. Right? TikTok, the most popular video platform right now, has a maximum time of 30 seconds worth of content. And so don't do long speeches. Don't think I should take this speech I would have given in person for an hour and put it online, because when you put it online, people don't have to really pay attention. When I'm sitting in an auditorium for an hour, I'm kind of locked in. I'm watching that speaker. But when you, like right now, I am guessing there is some chunk of you that have another window open or another screen open, or you may in fact just be making coffee or doing something else in the room and hearing me just out of one ear. Like people's attention is very, very hard to grab. And so be brief, be as engaging as you can. Engagement is the name of the game when it comes to virtual events. And it's why I sort of saved it for last, because I can't tell you how important this is. We're all zoomed out, right? We've all are on the webcam all the time, way too much. And yet one more virtual event doesn't necessarily sound that exciting. And so the more engagement you can build into it, the better. Like, as we run through these bullets, chat and social media, actually talking in real time with someone through chat. Like we talked about Tim's Twitter listening party, but all these applications do this. You can do it in WebEx, which is what I'm on right now. And you can actually engage in a real conversation, not just with the speaker, but with other people who are watching. Having live Q&As like we're going to do here shortly. Using polls like we did before with the Mentimeter poll that you all were voting on. Have side tents or breakout rooms, right, where smaller groups in the event can break off on their own and have, a more intimate conversation. Happy hours are great for that. Virtual, I'm a big fan of the virtual happy hour. All our department chairs in our college, every Friday at 5, we're all pouring a drink and sharing our misery. Virtual happy hours, side tents, breakout rooms are fantastic. Give a break between your programming. For example, if you have 2 speakers, in the break between those speakers, have a chair yoga session. Bring in a yoga instructor to do a chair yoga session for 5 minutes. Right? Get people kind of out of that cognitive rut that they're in. Pair people off. Give them homework to do ahead of time. In between presentations, interview participants, right? As you're going between your speakers, bring in someone who's a random person who's there who agrees to talk with you a little bit about who they are and why they're there. Think about extending the content after the event. So not just recording it and putting it up live, but can you keep the conversation with the participants in some way active? Hashtags, virtual spaces, Google Docs, that kind of thing. Think about gamifying it, using quizzes and contests. That goes a long way. It's a lot of fun. One of the things that I did yesterday at Nudgestock, there was a great presentation from the Chief Design Officer of Lloyds Bank in London. And he was talking about how boring banking is and how to try to create a banking product around retirement. And so he asked all of us to pull out a piece of paper and draw a picture of what retirement is for us. And then he showed how they did this as an exercise, and they used it to rethink how they were talking to their customers about saving for retirement. And we all got to share these things that we drew, and we'd hold them up to the webcam and talk a little bit about them. Like, don't kill people through PowerPoint. People are, it is what I'm doing now, right? Like putting up a slide and reading bullets that you all could read without me saying it, it's not particularly valuable. So think about building broader engagement. There are tools I use, for example, in my class and for some presentations, I use Miro a lot. You should take a look at that. It's fantastic. It's a virtual collaboration tool. It's basically like having a whiteboard and Post-it notes, except everyone's doing it virtually. And so you can play around with ideas and edit and change things. Google's got a product called Jamboard, which is a physical product and a virtual one. I've got the physical product in my office, but the virtual one works the same way. It's like a giant collaborative whiteboard. If you think about a Google Doc where people can draw, write, put up Post-it notes, embed Google Docs, that kind of thing, examine some of these online engagement tools. I just realized I spelled Stormboard backwards there. It's spelled the way you think it ought to, so ignore that. Then how do you make money with all this stuff? Right, there are three large categories of ways that you can monetize a virtual event. You can have gated virtual events, which means you charge for admission. This is hard to do, right? People do not value a virtual experience the way they value the physical one. At some point, hopefully in our lives, that will change, but at the moment they don't. But you certainly can do that. These platforms have ticketing strategies. I did a live stream concert a couple of days ago from this band called Whitney that I like a lot. And all the money was going to this charity for musicians who are in a super bad way right now with COVID. And so I was happy to pay $15 to be able to do that, right? I'd pay more than that for a ticket. The second strategy is to go cheap and then augment that with sponsorship and tips. I like cheap only in that people have some skin in the game. If you make it completely free, folks just don't feel as invested in showing up. And so even like $1, right? $2, $3, another musician I like, Robin Hitchcock, every week does a show. He uses a platform called Stage It, and he charges $5 for it. And then while you're watching it, it has the ability to leave tips. And so you can request songs and you can leave a tip as a thank you. And then the third is, of course, free. And look, here's I know it's like the toothpaste is out of the tube with this. Much in the same way that musicians no longer make money with records because music is online for free, it's forced them to think about other business models. We are going to have to think about other business models for virtual events. Charging thousands and thousands of dollars for events, that's going to go away. And we're going to have to think about other ways, micro payments, sponsorship, leveraging the data and the analytics, other ways that we can monetize an event, because there's simply no way by charging to make these things pan out. And I know it's a depressing notion, but that's the reality of where we are today. Okay, there was a question previously about what do you measure when you all submitted questions. Someone asked about measurement. How do you know whether or not your virtual event is effective? This bulleted list gives you a sense of some of the things that people measure with virtual events. I'm not going to read through all these bullets, but all of these things have some measurement associated with them. The one I'll mention, the very last one, is probably the best all-encompassing metric or KPI to use for virtual events, which is what's called the Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score is where you ask people on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to recommend this event to a friend? And if it's above 5, that's positive. It's below 5, it's negative. And it's got this algorithm for giving you a score, and your Net Promoter Score gives you a sense of kind of how well it went. And so I think that's a really critical KPI, but all of these are great ways to measure the effectiveness of these sorts of events. So here's the idea I want to leave you with. and I know music has been the theme of this presentation, so let's end with it. Look, CDs sound amazing. And I have seen the data, I have seen studies, I've done side-by-side comparisons. MP3s and streaming music do not sound as good. They don't. But you know what? The difference between how good a CD sounds and how slightly less than perfect the Spotify stuff sounds, that is totally swamped by the convenience of using Spotify. I had thousands of CDs at one point. They are all gone. They are all gone. All my music, for the most part, is MP3s now, or I stream it on Spotify. I know it is a subpar way to listen to music, but I listen to it because Spotify's with me all the time. It's in my phone. It's in my car. Right? It's everywhere, and I don't need to dig around. I can easily find things. I can search. I mean, there's so many things about it that are so much easier for me than dealing with CDs, even though the music isn't as good. The same thing can be said for virtual events. Look, a virtual event that you try to model after the real one, right? South by Southwest, for example, which was canceled this year. They talked about, and actually kind of sort of, but not really, did a virtual version of it, but it's not the same, right? I know that it is not the same to experience a virtual event as a physical event. But what you've got to focus on is, what does the virtual platform allow you to do that the physical one doesn't? Like Spotify lets me create playlists super fast and see other people's music lists. I made an awesome COVID playlist, by the way, which I ought to be sharing in here. And I can't do that with my CDs, like mixtapes, that kind of thing. I mean, they took forever. So don't focus on perfection. Focus on being effective with your virtual event. And then how can that virtual event do something that your perfect real event never could do, right? That's the challenge you want to take. So this whole slide deck's available at the URL that's at the top there, bit.ly/alumni weekend virtual, all lowercase. And if you, for some reason, can't find it, you can always find me and send me an email. I'd be happy to share it with you. And Molly, I'm sure, would do the same. And so what we're going to do now is Molly's going to get me out of my presentation here, and she's been collecting any questions that you all have. And we're going to do a little bit of Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Glenn. That was such good information. I think that you had quite a few good ideas about how to make virtual content especially relevant. And I think people are looking for ways at this juncture in the framework of COVID to maybe sass up their virtual offerings a little bit. So great ideas. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. They oftentimes kind of keep coming as well. So question number one is from Stephen, and he mentions Periscope. He says, Periscope seems to have devolved into, simply base purposes. Is there a hope for better usage for platforms like that?
Yeah, that's a great observation, Stephen, and you're absolutely right. Like when Periscope first came out, I was like, oh, this is going to change everything, right? And it didn't evolve into, what I had hoped, which would be like a broadcast platform for all kinds of interesting things. It sort of devolved the other way, which is how the internet often goes. And so it's full of all kinds of terrible stuff, I think. So I do not think Periscope, I don't think there's much hope for it. I don't think Twitter leveraged it the way they could have. And then Facebook came along with Facebook Live, and LinkedIn's got LinkedIn Live, and all these other platforms that already have a bigger audience, already can do it better. And so I'm with you. I don't think Periscope is the app to get. I just like demoing it because I like the way you can, the sort of map view that it gives you. But I think if you really want to do a live event using your mobile device, you're much better off using Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram. Instagram right now would be kind of my preference of all of them, just because of how popular it is.
Great, excellent. Next question. Matt asks, how are virtual events impacting the market for professional speakers?
So I'll give you kind of the half full and half empty answer to that. In one sense, it's really opened up the market for virtual speakers because they don't have to travel. So, for example, I was talking a couple days ago. I'm going to be a total humble brag. So I'm presenting at Procter and Gamble's Signal event this year, which I'm really excited about. It's an awesome event, and it's going to be virtual. And they were like, "Well, you want to know who you're presenting with? We think it's going to be Ron Howard and Mark Dorsey, right? And who knows whether all these people are going to totally pan out at the moment. But like all these folks would never fly to Cincinnati for an event like this. I mean, they might, but it's super hard to do. But so you can take a famous person and spread them out over more events because they're virtual. So the one I saw yesterday with Dan Ariely, didn't have to fly to London for Nudge Stock. He was in his apartment here in the US. And so he can do more of these and we can see more of these people. Now, on the downside, when we talk about the market for these things as a supply and demand kind of thing, I think the price that speakers get is taking a huge hit, right? A lot of these speakers were getting paid pretty significant sums of money to be keynote speakers at these events. And it's harder to get that kind of money in a virtual version, just because what I've been talking about in this presentation, the world sadly does not value these kinds of virtual events as they do physical ones.
Very true. Next question is from Marie. She wants to know what was the name of the Google Suites platform you mentioned that offers sort of virtual like Post-it notes?
Yeah, it's called Jamboard. So if you JAM like jelly, JAM board, BOARD. So it's an app. It's on your iPad or your phone, and it's like a virtual whiteboard kind of thing. But I think it's particularly cool because it also can connect with a physical whiteboard. Like I have in my classroom this digital whiteboard, and so I can have people drawing on it on their phones anywhere in the world or in my class, and it's all showing up live real time on what's on this whiteboard that I have on my screen, but it's also showing up on their screen. I like it a lot. It's super cool.
It's particularly convenient in this time, this day and age. So I believe that is all the questions that have come in thus far. Oh, wait, maybe there's one more. Patrick asks, what company or resources would you recommend to follow that would help stay current with like the cool new stuff or what is available and affordable?
Oh, boy, that's $1 million question. So I'll tell you what came to mind immediately. There's a website called Product Hunt, 2 words put together, product and HUNT.com. That is where I see like the latest and greatest as it's coming out. Like anyone who's got an app or a thing that's super cool techie stuff on the cutting edge will typically unveil it there. But it's not specifically for virtual events. It's just for everything. But Spatial, which I talked about here, that head-mounted virtual reality thing where we watched the video. I found out about that when they went alpha. The alpha version of it was announced on Product Hunt, and then I reached out to the company right after that. So that would be the one. But there are so many sites these days that talk about technology. The information is a nice tech site, but it's expensive. Free ones like Mashable and TechCrunch. I don't know. I tend to be more in kind of the tech entrepreneurship space, so I kind of skew that way. But those would be the ones I might look at.
Okay. And I think we have time for this one last question that has come in.
All right.
I think it's kind of a good one. This is from Lisa. She says, have you found that there's an ideal number of participants for live virtual events if you're hoping for interaction among those participants?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think the number is sadly low. Like to get real engagement from participants, you've got to use that breakout room. Like 20 is about the max you're going to get before people start fading into the woodwork. And you sort of use your own experience from Zoom calls, right? The Zoom calls with 4 or 5 people are very different. I'm on the Return to Campus committee here at Miami, and we meet twice a week to figure out how Miami's going to come back in fall. And there's like 50 people on that committee, and so we get on this WebEx, and I have to work hard not to check out, just because there's so many people, and you're just, it's almost like you're listening to a phone call. So I think 20 is a magic number. But obviously virtual events are going to have more than that. And so thinking about, once you scale up, I think the difference between 30 and 300, or let's say 50 and 300, or 50 and 1,000 is almost nothing. Because at that point, they're all sort of at the same level of disengagement. And so building a way for these chunks of 20 to engage with each other would be my advice.
Great. I think what you said about the intimacy earlier certainly lends itself to that kind of participation. All right. And one last thing, not at all a question, and I'm not going to mention last names, but Michael B says your beard looks good.
Oh, you like it? It's my COVID beard.
Yeah.
The COVID hair has gotten really long. I've got a ton of product to keep it from looking too outrageous at the moment. But yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I like the compliment.
I thought it was a good, honest assessment. So thanks, Michael. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. As a reminder, like Glenn said, a recording of this presentation will be available on the website later today. So you can go get that link to his actual PowerPoint presentation. And we want to thank you again, Dr. Platt, for leading this webinar today. And please be sure to look at our other online events. We're presenting this weekend as a part of our virtual alumni weekend. Coming up at 3:30, we have a webinar with Dr. Kimberly Vance, Director of the Cliff Alexander Office of Fraternity and Sorority Life. She'll be highlighting and detailing all the happenings around Greek life here at Miami, and registration is still open for you to attend. So please go to miamialum.org/alumni weekend for more information. Thank you again, Dr. Platt, and thank you all for joining us. Love and honor to you.
Bye-bye.
Very went.